You were telling me that something which is very unfortunate, generally members of the Hispanic community will not seek political office.
Yeah, yes.
Why is that?
Well, everybody hates a politician, right? And I think Hispanics, you can say, probably hate them times two. Remember, they come back from countries that also have their own political systems and their own political history. And so, if you're looking at the events happening right now in Venezuela, it's almost like a 1776 that's still pretty fresh, in the nation of Venezuela. And I think what it is that Hispanics come here looking for work, and politics is not one area where they consider a work opportunity, an occupation opportunity. But when you do have a high percentage of a population, we typically just vote for anybody who is not from our community, and that's been. That has changed probably in the last, in my generation or so, I would say, that has changed. But another interesting phenomenon is that you have Hispanics who do become part of political parties in the state, typically Republican and Democrat. And those parties don't really do much to develop these, Latino leaders to come out and represent them in anything. It doesn't matter whether it's a village trustee office or mayor's office or anything higher than that. So part of it is that, Hispanics have very poor attitudes about politicians to begin with. And the other part of it is that those who do make the leap and do get politically involved are not really developed by the parties to move forward. So
you were also concerned about, and it's not limited to the Hispanic community. I've heard this from other minority communities as well, that there is very low voter participation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And if you want to change, especially local is more important than national.
I agree. And so this is a very interesting dilemma with the Hispanic population, right? So back home, when Hispanics vote in the old country, the turnout is amazing, 80%. 90%. In the last elections in Puerto Rico, there was a 86% turnout, I believe is what it was. That was in 2012. In the last Mexican elections, I think it was also that high. They come here to the United States and the vote is, maybe 30%. In a very highly contested race. In the United States, you have elections. Well, here in the state of New York, you have elections every year. So the presidential cycle is the one that brings in the most vote. And Hispanics really don't come out to vote very high in those elections. 30% will probably be a good number. White Americans are probably a little higher than that. African Americans are lower than that. It's unfortunate because here you have a population that is really generationally not accustomed to staying home on election day. They do vote. And so, what we would love to do, and what the Hispanic Coalition is trying to do, is then trying to encourage them to at least engage politically as a citizen and exercise that basic right of a citizen, which is to come out and vote. You did it in the old country. Your mother and father did it in the old country. Your grandparents did it in the old country. Why not do it here? So that's always been a challenge. But like I said, this is not something. This is a new phenomenon for the Hispanics that are coming into this country. You've told me, in fact, I know you are. You're involved in a voting rights lawsuit right now, right? That's correct. Yes.
Talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So in 2010, there was a census, and after every census, there is a move to do district to reflect population changes. And I want to say in 2011, the following year, was the year that the Albany County Legislature, it was their turn to redo their legislative districts. And the census did show that there was a significant growth of the minority population in the city of Albany. This is predominantly concentrated in the city of Albany. The legislature approved a map that basically didn't really take into account that population growth.
Changing demos.
That's correct. So one of the arguments from the county has been that Hispanics and African Americans, this is really the crux, and this is why I'm involved, are not really minorities, even though they live in the same neighborhood, even though there's a socioeconomic commonalities, that they're not really minorities, that they should be considered as two separate groups. And why we've been arguing is, well, no, we live next to each other. And, in other cities in New York State, we're considered, we're counted and considered and districted as one. It was just in the city of Albany. So this lawsuit is still ongoing, and we were hoping to have it resolved by the next legislative election cycle, which is going to be in 2015.
Right.
So I don't know if we are going to get that additional legislative district to represent what they call minority majority districts. M&M. So just think of the candy. M&M. I don't know if we're going to have one in time for that election. But again, the case is still ongoing, and apparently there's been enough merit for the judges to keep it on their docket.
Because of Buffalo's proximity to Canada,
yes,
and New York City's obvious proximity to the rest of the world,
yes,
you have expressed concern about those two cities being entrances to New York State and the country for human trafficking.
Sure.
Want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the great things about having the Hispanic population growth is that we are actually taking leadership in issues that affect everybody, not just the Hispanic population, but because we are also affected, we pretty much are kind of on the forefront. And so one of them is immigration, and the other one is human trafficking. Human trafficking, you need gateways across national borders for human trafficking to happen. To occur, and because we have a pretty open border still with Canada, there is a problem. There is a problem there, and like you mentioned, everybody, in the Spanish radio station, they refer to New York and New York City as the capital of the world, and so everybody comes to New York, and there's a huge human trafficking problem in New York. And what's interesting is that it actually has grown, and we keep discovering more cases of kids being trafficked, and unfortunately women being trafficked as sex slaves across the state of New York. And so proximity with borders obviously is an issue, but there are other ways to come into the state of New York and traffic human beings into the state of New York that actually would not happen if we actually had stronger border security, with Mexico and maybe even Canada. Even though we always have had a great relationship, with Canada. There's been a significant increase, and I hope that the increase is because we are noticing it more. Not because it's happening more, but we keep hearing of cases. There was a case in Long Island that they busted a huge human trafficking ring. Long Island, New York City suburb. This was always a very affluent area, and guess what happened? In Queens, there was an issue involving slave workers. So, and when we are the ones, out there, every year we have the Hispanic Coalition does an event addressing solely human trafficking.
Speaking of events, one event that you have every year, and I want to be sure we talk about it, is 40 over 40. Want to talk about that?
40 under 40.
Oh, it's 40 under 40.
You're going to be the 40 over 40. I'm the 40 over 40. Sure. So every year, this I think is going to be our fourth year.
Okay.
And we have it around at the same time that the SOMOS conference occurs in the state of New York and in Albany. We have this event where we recognize Latino leaders all over the state. Up and coming Latino leaders all over the state. And one of the things that has been something that I wanted us to recognize is the true diversity of Hispanics in the state. And so we recognize and we give an award to all these up-and-coming stars in Latino leadership, and they range from kids who are politically active, kids who are activists, kids who are, I keep saying kids because anybody younger than me is a kid now. Kids who are, attorneys, they're doctors, and a point on diversity. We have Hispanics don't necessarily really jive as a population with either side of the aisle. I mean, there are some that believe in X and others believe in Y. But at one point, we had actually honored a young woman who was a activist with Occupy Wall Street. and one that was part of the Tea Party. So here you have two Hispanic women, two Latinas.
Two different philosophies.
They got along. They accepted the award. They got along. But this is what we are aiming to do. We just don't want to recognize Latinos that are doing something in just one profession. We want to recognize it across the board. And we don't really have an interest in any one, we're apolitical. So if you're doing something and you're taking it to the system, or you're climbing a corporate ladder, we want to recognize you. And so that's been our main event. It's very well attended by people all across the state. And every year we get a great political face, to show up. Last year it was Attorney General Schneiderman who came to visit, and our first one, Congressman Tonko, showed up, and the second one, it was everybody. It was like the two parties got together. So we had senators, Democratic senators and Republican senators show up to the second event, and so it's a great opportunity to look at the real diversity of Hispanics, and for people to actually get to meet their political leaders in Albany.
Just about out of time. If someone wants to get additional information on the Hispanic Coalition, how can they contact you?
Go to the website, hcnewyork.com, .com or .org. But
okay.
Just try both, you'll be okay. And there's information there about events and everything that we're doing, even things that we've done in the past. We did the mayoral event, the mayoral debate last year in the city of Albany. So, we're trying to do bigger and greater and bigger things.